Uh, uh, cool. So we're gonna go get started, and if anybody shows up in the middle, then that's totally cool. They'll show up in the middle. And considering that it's Spain and everybody shows up late for everything, that's probably pretty likely. Um, cool. So let's just go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with you guys. And we're gonna go to our presentation. Awesome. So if you guys have any questions during the presentation, just go ahead and put them in the chat. Or since there's not that many of us, you can go ahead and unmute and just ask. I'll ask for questions sort of throughout. Um, we're just going to go through some of this information and then and then have some time to chat about it as well. So basically, I wanted to talk a little bit about cravings and emotional eating because I know that this is an issue that comes up even when we're not in quarantine, and I think in quarantine it's something that can kind of rear its ugly head even more because we've got more time at home, our schedules are totally different, we're a little bit stressed out, and I think it's really important to understand how to deal with these types of issues because no matter what, they're going to keep coming up if we don't really know how to effectively deal with them. So first of all, who am I? You guys know me. I'm Jillian. I'm a certified health coach from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. I'm also a nutrition coach with Precision Nutrition. I've got the level 1. I've taken a sports nutrition course certification here in Barcelona, and I'm also a CrossFit level 3 trainer. So that's a little bit about me. And what do I do? Basically, I work with clients that want to make changes to their bodies, lifestyles, and mindset without following a typical diet. Basically, for me, dieting is not the way to live your life. It's a short term thing, if anything. And I want to teach people, or I work with people to figure out a lifestyle that's more sustainable. And I have a method that I utilize in order to do this, and it's called the Q squared B squared. Basically, that has to do with quality and quantity of what you're eating, and then the connection between your body and your brain. And those are things usually diets just deal with sort of the quality and the quantity. Normally, it's more the quantity than anything else. But with these 4 components are really, really key, and making sure that you are sort of making a whole sort of holistic change to your lifestyle and to your mindset, and making sure it's something that's actually sustainable in the long term. So basically, I help you become more conscious of your nutrition lifestyle habits so you feel and look great, and I help people learn how to stop the dieting cycle. And then something that's really, really important for me to teach my clients is I want people to feel good in their own bodies because I think that especially as females, we get a lot of information and a lot of it's conflicting, and we're also constantly judged for what we look like, and so it can be really hard to actually feel good in your own body. So that's a big part of what I want to help people do. So basically, the body brain connection is kind of what we're going to be focusing on today. Your body is smart. We know that your body is really, really smart, and I think most of us don't stop to listen to the signs that it gives us on a day-to-day basis. And so creating that brain body connection is a key component to improving emotional eating patterns and reducing cravings. So that's what we're going to get into. Basically, there is physical hunger and there's emotional hunger. So that's like physical biological hunger. That's your body needs energy. And then we have emotional hunger, which is sort of where the cravings and emotional eating come in. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to just kind of distinguish what is physical hunger and what is biological or emotional hunger. Because I think sometimes they can get mixed up, and sometimes we don't realize um, which one we're dealing with. So physical hunger, I also refer to physical hunger, biological hunger. It's a biological need. It's not something that appears suddenly. So that's something that's going to grow over time. So basically, you'll start feeling like, oh, I could eat. And then, oh, okay, no, I'm actually pretty hungry. And then, and then that will grow to no, like I need food now. And so you actually feel that in your body. You feel it in your stomach. It'll be like a grumbling noise, or you can definitely feel like it can, Anna, amazing. Um, so it can, it's a physical sensation. It normally appears a few hours after a complete meal. The reason I say normally is because if you're consistently under eating, it's normal that you're hungry like an hour after a complete meal. So if you're eating a complete meal and it's enough food for you, you should not be hungry within like 3 to 4 hours. And physical hunger or biological hunger doesn't need a specific food or flavor in order to be satisfied. Biological hunger, you may feel like eating something, but realistically, your hunger will be satisfied with pretty much any food. Emotional hunger, on the other hand, it tends to come on more suddenly. So it tends to be associated more with a certain food or flavor. So things that are crunchy, salty, sweet tend to be sort of the more common ones. And it appears as a result or a reaction to certain tasks or certain emotions. So, for example, like if you have to sit down and do a bunch of paperwork and you hate paperwork, then you might think like, oh, I'm going to go eat some popcorn. But that's not a biological need. That's like you don't want to do paperwork, and so you like in order to make yourself feel better about that, you're okay, food. And so I think especially right now that we have a lot of time at home, it's sort of like we end up looking for a lot of the answers to like life's questions by opening the fridge and just seeing what's in there. Um, and emotional hunger doesn't go away if you deny it. So it's not like physical hunger. Sometimes if you're hungry and you're like, I'm busy, I need to finish it, the feeling kind of like comes and goes a little bit. Emotional hunger is like a nagging sensation in the back of your head. Um, and also it's not a physical sensation, so it's not something that has like a physical connection to your brain. It's basically just your brain and your emotions telling you that you are hungry for something. So questions, anybody have any questions about emotional hunger or biological hunger? Or we can continue on. I'm going to make sure I've got the chat here to see you guys. All right, cool. Awesome. Moving on. Cravings. So cravings are not caused by physical or biological hunger. They're generally caused by emotional hunger. So it's for a specific food or taste most often. Like when you have a craving for something, you'll usually think like, oh, I really want pizza, or like I really want chocolate. And the thing with cravings is it's not satisfied with a small portion. So cravings are not something that you're like, oh, I'll just have, a small piece of something, or I'll have one piece of pizza and then that's it. And then the issue with cravings is that it's generally associated or followed by a sensation of guilt. So that is actually a big problem that we're going to talk about a little bit later. And the issue with denying cravings, so if you have a strong craving for something and you deny it, that can often backfire. So that basically is like, you want chocolate and you decide, no, I can't have any, and then eventually you break down. Instead of eating a piece of chocolate, you eat the entire box of chocolate, so the entire bar of chocolate. um, Continuing on, however, cravings do have a relationship to biological hunger if, and this is especially important for people that tend to be on diets, or go through the cycle of dieting over and over. If you've been dieting for an extended period of time, or if you've been consciously or unconsciously under eating, your body can start asking for what it needs to survive. So like, here's an example. I know it's like super popular for everybody to go on these super low carb diets. And a lot of people, for some people, they work really well. A lot of people, if they don't have the proper knowledge to do them, can actually be under eating in general without realizing it. And so your body, if you have strong cravings for carbs, that may actually be a biological reaction to your body needing more food. So just wanted to give you that kind of caveat there. Um, and the thing with emotional hunger is it isn't solved by eating. And I think we all know this. This is like, I think we can all kind of be like, yeah, I know. Because when you're done eating, whatever emotions are happening, they're still there. But now they're also accompanied by this sense of guilt of like, well, fuck. Like, I don't feel great about what just happened. So we need to start working on that. um, Continuing the cycle of restriction. So this is sort of like what happens in this whole process, because a lot of this stuff really comes from restriction. It's coming from those lists of like, this is good and this is bad. Like I can eat this, I can't eat this. And so that sort of culminates into creating more cravings, creating the cycle of emotional hunger, and it's just this whole snowball effect. So I'm sure if you've ever gone on a diet or restricted food, you know that when you go on a diet that cuts out certain foods, you want those foods even more because you're like, oh, I can't have them. It's like if I tell you, like, don't think about a pink elephant, like, obviously you're going to think about a pink elephant. So then we start this battle of like, okay, no, I can't eat that. Like you have this internal battle of not eating this restricted food or these restricted food groups. And you try to almost substitute it for something better. It's like, the typical low carb diet. Like, oh, I'm going to make like cauliflower pizza. And like cauliflower pizza can be delicious, but it's not pizza. Like we know that. Um, and so what can happen a lot of the time, especially if this becomes a cycle, is we end up eating, like in the end, we break and we end up eating more than we would have if we had just eaten the thing that we wanted in the first place. And so this cycle of restriction is kind of a big issue when it gets to that point when you're like constantly trying to like substitute other things for the things you really want. And then you get to a point where you're like, I just ate, 17 rice cakes when I really wanted, uh, some tortilla chips. And I ate 17 rice cakes and then I still ended up eating half the bag of tortilla chips. So what's the solution? We need to stop the cycle of restriction. If you consistently restrict certain foods when you do have them in front of you, it's like the Last Supper. It's like, I got to get this in because you don't know the next time you'll allow yourself to have them. Or it's like oh, well, I'm starting the diet. The diet starts Monday, so I better eat all of the bad food that I have in my house now. Whereas if we stop the cycle of restriction and we just let ourselves eat what we genuinely want, then we don't have this cycle of undereating, overeating, undereating, overeating. But it's clearly, and I'm sure you guys are all like, yeah, but like that's not that easy. And like I get it, it's not that easy, but we're going to talk about some tools for you guys to put in practice to help it become easier. All right, cool. So this is a story that I really like to tell. Or do you guys have any questions up until now? No? All right. Everybody's with me? Do we like this so far? Are we good? Cool. Awesome. So this is a story about one of my clients that it was a really cool experience that I had with her because she came to me and she was like, I don't necessarily want to lose weight, but she's like, but I want to feel, she's like, oops, sorry. We've got another one. She's like, I don't necessarily want to lose weight, but I do want to feel more in control. Hola, Paolo. So basically she said to me, she's like, look, I feel really out of control when I'm with my friends or I go somewhere on the weekends and there's like chocolate around or there's bags of potato chips. Anna and Courtney here in Spain, everybody loves potato chips. Like tortilla chips are not really a thing, but potato chips, everybody loves them. And so she was like, I feel super out of control and I can't stop myself. And so she would make these deals with herself when these situations would come up. And she'd be like, well, today I can eat this, but tomorrow I'll be perfect. Or like today I can eat this, but I could never ever keep chocolate or these potato chips at home. Or like today I'll have some, but I just won't eat dinner later. Or like today it's okay, but it's just because like I had a really hard day. And so like I deserve it. And so it was this continuous cycle of like feeling bad for doing something, then restricting herself in the future for this thing that, really was kind of causing her a lot of mental stress. And so what we did is I basically asked her, I was like, hey, I'd like you to buy a bag of your favorite chips. I'd like you to buy, the ones that you like the most, and I'd like you to keep them at home. And I'd like you to allow yourself to have them whenever you want. But I want you to know that the first couple of times you may eat the whole bag, but you'll get to a point where you realize that you don't want the whole bag of chips. And when you know that you always can have them, it takes away their power. And so when she stopped restricting, when she stopped feeling like this was something that was not okay, she got to the point where she was like, I've had this bag of chips in my house for like 2 weeks and I haven't even opened it, because she knew that she could have them whenever she wanted. So that's kind of what I'm talking about with breaking the cycle of restriction. So moving on, when we stop with the strict food rules, with like the good, the bad, the I can have this, I can't have this, food loses its control over us. And so here's my question for you guys. Would you really eat an entire pizza or a giant slice of cheesecake or an entire bag of chips every day? Is that something that you would do every day? If I was like, you can eat that every day and it's just not gonna in like it won't, it won't have any effect on your weight. Would you guys want to do that every day? I think, at first it kind of seems like, oh, that sounds awesome. But you would get sick of it really, really quickly. And it would get to the point where like it wouldn't be attractive anymore because it becomes very everyday and mundane. And so here's some questions to ask yourself to really start becoming more introspective. How do you feel physically when you eat a meal that has protein? That's it's a balanced meal. So you've got protein, you've got healthy fat, you've got healthy carbs, and you've got some veggies. How do you feel when you eat a balanced meal? If you guys want to unmute, or if you guys want to like say something, chat in the chat, um, you can go ahead and do that. And just let me know. How do you guys feel good when you eat a balanced meal? Energized?
I feel great when I eat
Yeah.
a balanced.
Yeah. And then how do you guys feel physically after you eat a whole pizza or like a big thing of ice cream or a big piece of cake? Not mentally. How do you feel physically?
Like shit.
Yeah. And so that's something, those are one of those some of those signs that I was talking about in your body that I think that when we think about it that way, it's like, oh, like I really don't feel that great when I eat these things. So when do you more tend to crave the pizza or crave the cake? When does that, like, when do those cravings tend to come up?
Boredom.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it can definitely be boredom, or it can be, in reaction to something that's going on in your life. I think also the fact of the matter is we associate food with a lot of, a lot of experiences. So, something great happens, like we celebrate it with food. Something bad happens, we console ourselves with food. And my last question, and this, you guys don't have to answer this if you don't want to. This, I know can be kind of personal, but what is your internal dialogue like when you eat something that you feel like you shouldn't? What goes on in your head? Because I think that this is something that's really important to think about, because we can be really hard on ourselves and say really nasty things to ourselves when we feel like we're misbehaving. And that has a really strong effect on our emotions. So just think about that, because we're going to come back and I'm going to have some tips for you guys to put into practice to kind of help this whole process move along. But first, I want to go over a few things. So before you eat, and this is before you eat anything. So like before you eat a snack, before you eat a meal, before you eat a pizza, pause first and ask yourself, am I physically hungry or am I thirsty? I add thirsty in there, not because like if you're hungry, you should just drink water, because that's like a crazy diet thing that people say like, oh, you feel hungry, but just drink water. No, that's ridiculous. If you're hungry, eat food. Um, but sometimes if we are not drinking enough water, that can make us feel hungrier because we're dehydrated. So pause first and ask yourself, am I physically hungry or am I thirsty? And you can go through those points that we talked about physical, biological hunger. Then ask yourself, from 1 to 10, how would I rate my hunger right now? So a 10 is like, I haven't eaten all day, or like I haven't eaten in hours and hours and I'm starving and I would eat anything that you put in front of me. And 1 is like, I just finished a meal and I am not hungry at all. And so we want to eat normally when we're between a 6, 7 on that scale. We don't want to eat meals when we're starving, because that's usually kind of when we tend to not even recognize what we're eating. And the fact is that eating should be pleasurable. And if we're starving, then it's not going to be as pleasurable because we're just not recognizing what it is that we're doing. And you don't want to eat when you're not hungry because you don't really need to. Um, and then the third question to ask yourself is, what do I really need right now? What is it that I really need? Do I need food? Do I need a hug? Do I need a nap? Do I need to just get my work done? What is it that I really need? And I think these three questions can be really, really helpful, especially if you find that you're like boredom eating or overeating, or you're not sure what your hunger feels like. I think this can be really, really helpful. So moving on. This is the practical part. This is like, okay, what the hell do I do to start fixing these issues? And so part, this the previous slide had those 3 questions that were really, really helpful. And now I'm going to give you guys 5 tips to put in practice. All right. One, so like we talked about in the last slide, pause before eating and recognize if what you're feeling is actually biological hunger or emotional hunger. So try to become conscious of that, because I think it takes practice, and that's something, I do this a lot with myself as well, especially now that I'm home all the time. um, and it takes a certain level of consciousness, but it's a really good tool to have to understand, like, hey, am I feeling biological hunger, or is what I'm feeling something that I need something emotionally? And then number 2, eat enough quality food and drink enough water throughout the day. This is important because I think that a lot of the time, especially when we're like, oh, I need to lose weight, then we start to restrict. Um, and there's a fine balance in order to lose body fat and also sort of like not, go nuts. There's a very fine balance. We don't want to be eating too little, because that can actually cause that, the cycle of restriction and overeating that we talked about earlier. So we want to make sure that we're eating enough food, and drinking enough water. Stop restricting the stuff that you enjoy so much. Ditch the list of good and bad foods. There's no such thing as a good food and a bad food. Everything is just amounts. So nothing is inherently good, nothing is inherently bad. It all depends on the amount that you eat of that food. Um, so if we can start sort of releasing that and just thinking of things in terms of like foods to eat more and foods to eat less, that can really help. Because if you, for example, if you have in your head like this is a bad food, then when you eat that food, that's kind of saying that you're a bad person for eating that bad food, and that is a terrible thought to have in your subconscious. So that can be really, really helpful. And then, especially for boredom eating, this one's really, really helpful. Find new hobbies or start participating in activities that occupy your mind and lift your spirits. So I just actually had this conversation with a client of mine about an hour ago where she was like, well, my hobby is cooking. And I'm like, that's an amazing hobby. But we also want to make sure that you have other things that you like to do that are not related to food. I think that, I love cooking, I love baking. But I also make sure I go out of my way to make sure that there are other hobbies, especially now that like I can't, go to the gym or go run or go for a hike. Um, Other hobbies that are not related to eating. So that's really, really important, especially now with the quarantine here in Spain. We can't really go outside. So yeah, you have to get creative. And then the last one is take steps towards understanding and managing your emotions better. And this is, I think sometimes can feel a little bit taboo, where it's like, people don't want to say like, well, I feel like I eat because I'm stressed or upset or, worried, but it's okay. Like a lot of people do it, and it's actually quite common. You guys would be surprised how many people I work with that are like, hey, my issues are more based around my emotions causing, and coming out with food. So, it's nothing to be sort of worried about or ashamed about. It's incredibly common. I deal with it myself. And so talk to someone, express what you need to your loved ones, especially right now that we're all in quarantine. It's really important, especially if you live with like your partner or your family. Express what you need, because if you're frustrated and you realize that you're snacking because you're frustrated because your partner's driving you insane, like that's something you need to talk to your partner about. That's not something that you need to be eating in order to deal with, because you're still going to be frustrated once you're done eating. Meditation and journaling can be really helpful. I know that meditation kind of is a little bit overwhelming for some people, and that's fine. But writing can be really, really useful as well. And it can be really helpful to sort of understand your emotions a little bit better. So this is kind of the wrap up for mostly everything that I have to say regarding nutrition. That your well-being is the foundation of everything else in your life. And I'm not talking about like well-being like girls in yoga pants talking about eating superfoods. I'm talking about like you actually just feeling good in who you are, feeling good in your body, feeling happy about the choices that you make. Like that is important. A lot of that is tied to food. Not all of it, but a lot of it can be. And it's worth taking the time and making the effort to improve it and making sure that you're okay. and asking for what you need from the people around you, and also just being self-aware and understanding like, this is what I need to be all right. And I also think that now is a really great time to invest in your present, like do the work now, and also invest in your future. We've got time, we've got the gift of time right now, and so take advantage of that. And I think so. Yeah, send me a message or write to me on WhatsApp. And if you guys are interested in learning a little bit more about kind of what my programs look like or how I work with my clients, I'm happy to chat with you guys about that. It's like not, I mean, no, sin compromiso. So like no strings attached. I'm happy to be really open about kind of what my process looks like. And yes, and then this is where you can find me. So I have my website in Spanish and English. It's all translated. So if you go to the website and you go to the top right side, I think it's the top right or the top left of the page, you see a little British flag, and that will translate it all into English. And then on Instagram, I also post always in English and in Spanish. The only thing that I don't have bilingual right now is my YouTube and my podcast. So you'll just have to learn Spanish. Sorry. So we have a couple minutes right now for some questions. If you guys want to ask me anything, go ahead and unmute yourself, chat with me. I hope you guys got something out of this. I hope you guys learned something. So yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. And I see your adorable little puppy in the background of your video.
Sorry, I'm driving. I didn't realize I would be driving at this time.
No. I love that I can see him. He's so cute. So yeah, if anybody's got any questions, or if not, you can also write to me if you're like, hey, I don't know if I really want to like say this in front of everybody. You can also write to me, and I'm happy to respond to any of your questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Jillian.
Thank you guys so much for participating and for being here. I'm also going to, this actually I will post on my YouTube. So this will be the only English video on my YouTube. So if you want to share it with anybody, if you think that, if you know anybody that could benefit from this, that also helps like my visibility as an independent business owner. So yeah, I hope you
No, I'm
guys.
sorry. I'm sorry I cussed.
Oh, I didn't hear it.
Okay, I'm glad. I didn't realize you were recording it.
So yeah, thank you guys so much for joining in. I'm going to sign off now, but as I said, go ahead and write me on Facebook, Instagram, email, whatever you want. And I hope you guys are all well wherever you are.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks for your time.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Muchas gracias.
Hasta
Ciao.
luego.